In a mansion outside Chicago, Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be another celebration of power, money, and family legacy. But beneath the candlelight and polished silver, a storm was waiting. She sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching the same people who had mocked her, ignored her, and erased her from the family business. Her father believed he still controlled everything. Her brother believed the company would one day be his. But neither of them knew she had already made her move. Before dessert was finished, the truth would come out. The daughter they rejected had returned not as family, but as the new owner.
Ever feel like a ghost in your own family? That's me. I'm Clara Hayes, the forgotten daughter of the Hayes Vineyards dynasty, and being the family disappointment is my greatest strength. As I drove up to our Napa Spa estate for the annual Harvest Gala, they had no clue I was about to shatter their vintage world. They just saw nerdy, quiet Clara. My father's big speech was meant to toast his legacy, but it would become the catalyst for a hostile takeover he never imagined. If you live for stories of family empires crumbling, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment, because you're about to see me dismantle my father's legacy grape by grape. I grew up on a sprawling Napa vineyard, a gorgeous estate with rolling hills and a cellar worth millions. We looked like the cover of a wine magazine. My grandfather built Hayes Vineyards from a small plot of land after he came home from the service. It was about passion until my father, Richard, took over. He expanded ruthlessly, turning it into a $100 million brand and making sure everyone knew it was his success, not my grandfather's. There were 3 of us Hayes kids. Julian, my 40-year-old brother and the heir apparent, got a fancy title but spent more time at ski resorts in Aspen and the tasting room. I was the overlooked middle child who actually understood data science and logistics. I was coding algorithms at 16 and graduated from Stanford with honors. I saw the digital future of the wine industry. To my father, I was an afterthought. And then there's Sophie, the youngest, who used our name to become a Napa lifestyle blogger. Sophie played the part of a wine connoisseur, but couldn't tell you the difference between Merlot and Malbec. She'd post selfies from our vineyard events, pretending to be a business mogul while doing zero actual work. Our mother, Isabelle, came from old San Francisco money, and her answer to everything was a fresh bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. She'd sometimes try to stand up for me, but always cave to protect my dad's fragile pride. "Richard, darling, perhaps Clara has an idea," she'd start, but would go silent the moment he shot her a look. "Isabel, this is business," he'd snap, before turning back to Julian to discuss distribution deals. Every family dinner felt like a marketing meeting I was barred from. Dad and Julian would talk about distributors and export laws, throwing around jargon while I sat there, knowing more about supply chain optimization than both of them combined. If I tried to speak up, Dad would just pat my arm. "That's nice, Clara. Let's leave the real business to the men, all right?" The final straw came when I was 22. Right out of college, I built a detailed proposal for a direct-to-consumer sales platform. It was revolutionary. I spent months on the code and the business plan. My father reluctantly let me present it to him and his inner circle, treating it like some cute little school project. My pulse was pounding as I walked into his study, my laptop in hand. His advisors were just old-school wine guys who stared blankly at my demo. I was barely 5 minutes into the presentation when Dad just held up a hand. "All right, Clara, I think that's enough," he said, with that patronizing smile I knew so well. "Clara, sweethearts, it's very modern. But it's not for us. Our clients appreciate tradition, not some algorithm in a cloud." He smirked at his buddies. "She's fresh out of Stanford, you know, full of big ideas. Now, let's get back to reality." I felt my face flush with anger as they all chuckled, and I closed my laptop. That night, I left Napa. I swore I'd build a tech company so powerful he couldn't ignore it. I moved to Seattle with 2 suitcases. My parents called it my rebellious tech phase. "She'll come crawling back once her savings run out." I heard my dad tell my mother. Those first years were brutal. I had a cramped apartment in Seattle, and my funds were disappearing fast. I lived on instant noodles and keef, coding day and night, first doing freelance work, then for myself. I invested every dollar into my own startup, Vintner Tech, which I founded as C. Hayes. No one could connect me to the Hazy Vincennes name. I started by building websites and sales funnels for small independent wineries, and I reinvested every single cent. After 3 years, I had a small team and a real office in South Lake Union. The breakthrough came when I finally landed VC funding for a massive logistics and sales platform, a more ambitious version of the one my father laughed out of the room. Big investors wanted a piece, but I never gave up control. In 7 years, Vintner Tech became a titan. managing distribution for hundreds of wineries. We were soon valued at over $900 million, and I did it all as C. Hayes. In the tech and wine industries, C. Hayes was a ghost, a brilliant strategist who never attended conferences or galas. For the rare times a public appearance was needed, I'd send my chief technology officer in my place. My family had no idea. During our brief, awkward phone calls, I'd say my little software company was doing okay. My father never bothered asking for details. In his world, I was a failure, and that was my greatest advantage. I was sharpening Vintner Tech into the blade that would cut his empire down to size. They didn't know that for the past year, my company had been systematically acquiring the debt of his biggest distributors. I analyzed his business model, found every single crack, and positioned Vintner Tech to choke his supply lines. 6 months ago, my CFO made a quiet offer to buy his struggling distribution arm. Naturally, my father scoffed at it. Now, 10 years after he broke my spirit, I was flying back to Napa for the Harvest Gala. Hayes Vineyards was drowning in debt, and I was about to become his biggest rival and his only way out. The week before the gala, I was in my Seattle office tower, finalizing the last move that would corner him. My assistant gave me my itinerary. "Your flight to Napa is confirmed for Tuesday," she said. "Are you certain you don't need the legal team there?" I just shook my head. "No, this is personal. I have to do this alone." A bit later, my phone buzzed. It was my best friend, Lena. "Are you really going through with this family disaster?" she asked. I looked down at the city lights. "I have to. I need to see his face when it all comes apart." "I just keep thinking about that awful birthday dinner 2 years ago," she said. "Your dad toasted Julian for landing a single new client, while you were quietly finalizing a deal worth more than their entire vineyard." That memory still stung. Dad raised glasses to the future, looking proudly at my brother, who was already half drunk. "This Harvest Gala will be different," I told her. "This time, I control the narrative." That evening, as I packed my bags, every outfit I selected felt like a piece of armor. The old Clara was gone. My suitcase was a war chest. A sleek black Armani pantsuit, a dark emerald gown for the gala dinner, Jimmy Choo heels, each item was a statement of power. A Patek Philippe watch, a simple leather portfolio, and minimalist gold jewelry. It wasn't flashy, but it radiated wealth. For years, I hid my success. Now, I wanted them to see it all before I burned it all down. Tuesday morning, I boarded the private jet. During the flight, I reviewed the acquisition documents one final time, making sure every line was perfect. The irony was almost painful. For a decade, I flew economy back to Napa, squished in a middle seat with a bag of pretzels, all while building the very company that was paying for this grand arrival. The jet landed at a private airfield, where a black Tesla was waiting for me on the tarmac. Driving through the familiar, winding roads of the valley, I felt a strange mix of homesickness and cold-blooded resolve. The Hayes estate looked exactly the same, a sprawling Tuscan-style villa with grapevines stretching to the hills. A massive banner for the Harvest Gala was already hanging over the gate. I had the driver wait, took a deep breath, and walked up the gravel path. My mother opened the door, her expression a mix of shock and appraisal, her eyes immediately fixated on my outfit. Clara hugged the smelling of expensive floral perfume. "You look so polished. Is that watch new?" "Just a little something for myself," I replied, stepping back. She led me inside, chattering about the caterers. I put down my bag. "Home. Your father is in his private cellar," she said. "He's been obsessing over some big deal, terribly secretive about it all." I managed a tight smile.
I'll go say hello. So Dad's cellar was his throne room stone walls, ancient barrels, and a tasting table.
I knocked, then opened the heavy oak door myself, a tiny rebellion. He glanced up, surprised, but quickly put on his usual dismissive expression.
"Clara."
"You're here." He gave me a quick, formal hug, pointing to a stool. "How was your flight?" "Couldn't have been smoother," I said, remaining standing. "I flew private." "Saves time," I said. He gave me a strange look. "A private jet? That's not cheap, Clara." I just shrugged. Business has been good. Before he could press, his phone rang. "Excuse me," he grumbled, turning away. "I have to get this." I could hear snippets of his conversation. "What do you mean the distributor canceled?" "No, I will not be strong-armed by Vintner Tech. Find me a solution." Vintner Tech, my company. My pulse was a steady drum, not of panic, but of victory. He hung up, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry about that," he said. "Just industry vultures." The same old dismissive tone. He didn't even see me. "Of course, Dad," I said. "I'll let you get back to it." I escaped my father's study and went to my old bedroom. It was a museum of the daughter they'd wanted. Yale Architecture Awards, debate trophies, photos from the country club, all gathering dust for a man who never looked up. After a quick shower, I found my brother Leo in the den, nursing a scotch at 3 in the afternoon. He had Dad's posture, but none of his backbone. Well, he said. raising his glass. Look what the train dragged in. Still playing with old houses out in Chicago? Something like that, I said through a tight jaw. How's the little renovation business? Finally managing to turn a profit. That condescending smirk was his signature welcome. Before I could respond, my sister Izzy swept in, phone out for her gallery's Instagram story. "Clara's back, darlings! A sterling reunion," she sang, air kissing the space beside my face. "You look amazing on... Find a private equity boyfriend yet?" "Just working on my own fund," I muttered, avoiding the camera. Leo pulled his new girlfriend closer, whispering as Izzy filmed. "That's Chloe. She's 24, a brand manager." A moment later, a chic blonde in a designer jumpsuit appeared. Leo draped an arm around her. "Chloe, this is my sister Clara. She's in Chicago, does something with old buildings. Started my career with a wave." "Oh, I love Chicago's architecture." Chloe chimed in, so gritty and authentic. The forced chatter was cut short by Dad's voice booming from his study. The sound was muffled, but the triumph was not. "Yes, that's the deal. We sign on Monday. Phoenix Capital is saving us." "They've been incredible partners," he went on. I slipped into the kitchen, needing to breathe. The staff were always my real family here. Elena, our cook since I was a girl, was plating appetizers. "Miss Clara," she said, her smile warm and real. "It's so good to have you home. You look strong. Chicago suits you." "Thanks, Elena. Can I help?" She waved me off. No, your mother wants everything just so. It's a big night. Your father is announcing wonderful news." I gave a small smile, knowing I was the only one who truly understood the news. "I've heard something about it," I murmured. The pre-dinner drinks were a train wreck. Mom floated around with a smile stretched tight as a drum. Dad was constantly checking his phone. Leo droned on about some design award, while Izzy posted candid family moments. I just sipped my Chardonnay and watched. The girl who craved their approval was gone. In her place was the woman who now owned them. "Dinner is ready," Mom announced, leading us to the dining room where Sterlings had feuded for a century. I took a breath, ready for the curtain to rise. The Sterling holiday dinner was always a performance. The massive oak table gleamed under a heavy iron chandelier, set with antique silver we used maybe twice a year. An elaborate centerpiece of white roses and ivy probably costs more than my first car. I had to hide a smirk. I was seated at the far end of the table from my father. Of course. Leo, the heir apparent, sat at his right with Chloe beside him. Izzy was on his left. Mom was at my end, a sea of polished wood between us and the head of the table. Elena and the staff started serving a wild mushroom soup. Next came a winter salad, then the main event, a huge standing rib roast surrounded by 10 complicated side dishes. Dad began carving with theatrical flair as Izzy's phone filmed the whole thing. "And here's Daddy carving, just as his father taught him. The Sterling tradition lives on," she narrated for her followers. I saw Mom wince and then drain her wine glass, her third by my count. When we were served, Dad tapped his glass for the annual toast. We each had to state what we were grateful for. The ritual felt hollow tonight. Leo, as the eldest, started. "I'm grateful for the continued excellence of Sterling & Sons," he said, though I knew the firm was bleeding money. "And for my new Audi," he squeezed Chloe's hand. "And for this amazing woman." Chloe beamed and kissed his cheek while Izzy rolled her eyes for her phone. Then it was Izzy's turn. "I'm just so thankful for the success of my new gallery show, and for all my wonderful patrons who support the arts." She gave a perfect smile to Dad, who nodded stiffly, despite hating her socialite career. When my turn came, I set down my glass and spoke clearly. I'm thankful for difficult lessons, for learning that being overlooked is a gift, that a good reputation is earned, not inherited, and that a strong foundation is everything. I raised my glass. To building something that lasts. Dad's jaw clenched at my words before he launched into a speech about his architectural heritage. Mom slurred a toast to family. Dad kept texting, whispering to my mother, whose smile looked like it might crack. Leo was telling a boring story about a client meeting, while Izzy scrolled through comments on her latest post. During dessert, Dad tapped his glass sharply, and the table fell silent. "I have some news," he announced, standing like he was addressing a boardroom. The room went quiet. Even Izzy put down her phone. "As you know, I've spent my life ensuring the Sterling name represents architectural excellence, but traditions must evolve, and it is time for this firm to enter a new era." He paused, savoring the moment. "I have secured a new partner to ensure our future." Leo choked on his port. "A partner? What are you talking about?" Dad held up a hand to silence him. "I've been in talks with a brilliant investment group for months. We are being restructured." Izzy gasped. "But Dad, our family's firm. My entire identity is tied to being a Sterling." "That brings me to my next point," Dad said, his face a mask. "The new board will be making some significant leadership changes." Leo and Izzy exploded. "It's our legacy," Leo shouted, his fist hitting the table. Leadership changes? Izzy cried, her phone now capturing the family drama for all to see. What does that mean? Dad let the chaos settle. Your mother and I will be retiring. The new board will steer the company. A foundation will be established in the Sterling name. Leo shot to his feet, his face red with anger. I've worked my whole life for that firm. You promised it would be mine someday. Izzy was openly weeping, making sure the camera caught her good side. Through it all, I sat perfectly still, taking a slow sip of wine. My mother's eyes found mine. Clara, she said quietly, you don't seem surprised. The fighting stopped as everyone turned to look at me, as if just remembering I was there. Actually, I said, setting my glass down calmly, I do have a question. I met my father's gaze. Who's the managing director of this investment firm? Dad swelled with pride. Phoenix Capital. They're led by a real shark, someone named C.M. Evans, a brilliant, ruthless mind. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Dad, I said, my voice perfectly level. I am C.M. Evans, and the room went absolutely still. The grandfather clock in the foyer began to chime, each gong echoing in the deafening silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I watched my father's face cycle through confusion, then disbelief, and finally a deep, burning rage. Leo broke the trance, his chair scraping loudly as he jumped up, knocking his wine glass over. Red wine bled across the white tablecloth. What the hell is she talking about? He shouted, staring from me to Dad. Izzy, of course, was still recording, her hand shaking as she aimed the phone at me. Oh my God, she breathed to her audience. You are not going to believe this. The one saving Sterling and Sons? Mom reached for her glass, found it empty, and grabbed the entire bottle. I stood up, feeling perfectly calm now that it was all out. Yes, Dad, me. My father finally found his voice. That's absurd, he scoffed. Phoenix Capital is a major equity firm, not my daughter who plays with dilapidated houses. I didn't say anything. I just picked up my tablet, opened a file, and slid it down the long oak table toward him. The homepage of the Phoenix Capital Investor Portal lit up the screen. Actually, Dad, my company is Blackwood Group. I started it 10 years ago, after you called my passion for historical restoration a foolish hobby. Dad snatched the tablet, his gaze fixed on my CEO portrait in the corporate profile. This has to be some kind of sick prank, he stammered, his voice thin. Blackwood owns Phoenix Capital, I explained calmly. We also own the bank that holds all of your firm's debt. We've been buying it up for the last year. Taking over Sterling and Sons was the final move. You set us up, Leo accused, his face pale with shock. You planned? No, Ethan, that's called due diligence. Every piece of information I have on this firm came from public records and market analysis, all perfectly legal. I turned to my father. The truth is, this company has been sinking for years. Your properties are dated, your marketing is ancient, and you've lost 40% of your portfolio value in 3 years. How dare you, Dad started, but I cut him off. I tried to help you. 6 months ago, Pulse Metrics made an anonymous offer to partner. It would have saved the Sterling name while we injected the capital you so desperately need. You rejected it out of pure ego. My father's face went completely pale. Project Seabreeze. That was you. I just nodded. I wanted to give you a chance to save the firm without your pride getting in the way. But you said no. So you've been planning this the whole time, Ethan screamed. A hostile takeover of our family's company. Not hostile, Ethan. A legal acquisition. For $60 million, which is frankly generous for a firm this close to insolvency. My voice was calm, masking the fury inside. And let's be honest, this stopped being a family business when Dad decided only one child was worthy of the throne, no matter how fast he was driving it into the ground. Chloe finally put down her phone, the reality sinking in. So, you're like our boss now? She asked. In a way, yes. Although the entire current executive team is being terminated. Dad launched out of his chair, its legs scraping loudly across the tile floor. The deal is off, he yelled. I will not sell my life's work to my own daughter to satisfy some petty, childish revenge fantasy. I just slowly shook my head. The contracts are signed, Dad. Your board voted yes this morning. The press release goes out at 7 a.m. As of an hour ago, Pulse Metrics owns Sterling Realty. I'll see you in court, he snapped, but the fire was gone from his eyes. And your lawyers will do what, exactly? I asked. They approved the sale. They're the ones who told you it was the best deal you'd ever get. What's your legal case? That you're furious the brilliant entrepreneur you've been reading about is your own daughter. Mom finally spoke, her voice cutting through a haze of wine. All this time, Maya, you were building this empire, and we all just thought that I was struggling to pay my rent I finished for her. Yes. Dad slammed his hand on the dining table. You have a choice, Maya. Right now. You can be my daughter, or you can be the scavenger who tore apart everything I built. You cannot be both. The ultimatum was so painfully predictable. 10 years ago, that would have broken me. Tonight, it just proved I was right about him all along. That's where you're wrong, Dad, I said softly. I am both. I've always been both. You're just the one who refused to see it. Chloe started crying, mascara running in black streaks down her face. What about us? Our trust funds? Our lifestyle? That, I replied, depends entirely on whether you want a career or you just want to be an expense on my books. Ethan pointed at me, his hand shaking. You planned this for Christmas, didn't you? To humiliate us. I did this on Christmas because it was the only day I knew you would all be here, I corrected him. And because 10 years ago, at this dinner, Dad made you vice president, even though you had zero experience. Meanwhile, my master's in data science from Stanford and my first successful app apparently didn't qualify me for even a summer internship. My father's face turned a deep, angry red. That's not the same. Ethan is my son. And there it is, I said, my voice almost a whisper. The real reason. It was never about my proposals or my skills. It was because I wasn't born his son. The truth hung in the room, silencing everything. Even Ethan seemed to fold into his chair. This dinner is over, Dad snapped. Everyone out. He turned and stormed off, and his office door slammed shut. Mom staggered to her feet, swaying slightly. I should go check on your father, she said, but stopped beside my chair. Is it true you're worth $500 million? I nodded. And all those years you couldn't come home for the holidays? When you said you couldn't afford the flight. I was funding the company, Mom. I needed the world to think I was broke. She touched my arm, her face a mess of confusion, then drifted away. Soon it was just me at the head of a shattered Christmas dinner. The food was cold. The candles had burned out. The family I'd fought so hard to impress had vanished. It was the victory I always dreamed of, but it felt more like a funeral. I escaped to my old bedroom as the war broke out downstairs. I could hear Dad shouting at his lawyers on the phone, while Mom tried to soothe him. Ethan's angry yelling was a constant rhythm under Chloe's dramatic sobbing. This room was a time capsule. Same bed, same desk where I first outlined my company's algorithms. The shelves were full of books on market prediction and classic literature. My old debate team trophies and programming awards were just gathering dust. And none of it ever mattered to the one person whose approval I craved. I ran my hand over old notebooks, pulling one down. The pages were filled with charts, business models, and the first code that would become Pulse metrics. It was almost funny. This whole tech empire started right here, in the one room I always felt completely unseen in. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. I opened it to my brother Ethan, his face red with rage and the smells of expensive whiskey. We need to talk, he slurred, pushing past me. I closed the door, folded my arms, and stood my ground. What's there to discuss, Ethan? How I ruined Christmas, or how you plan to inherit a company you've been running into the ground. You think you're so smart, he spat, pacing like a caged wolf. Little Maya, with her secret identity and her fancy startup, did you get some sick pleasure out of lying to us for years? About as much as you enjoyed stealing my ideas and passing them off as yours, I fired back. Remember Christmas 6 years ago, when I showed you that property valuation algorithm? Dad called it nonsense. And 2 months later, you presented my exact pitch deck as your own brilliant idea. Ethan froze, his face like a mask. I was working for this family. I was the one putting in the hours here while you were playing tech queen in Silicon Valley, trying to prove a point. You put in the hours, I'll grant you that. But what did you actually accomplish, Ethan? Besides expensing 5-star dinners and charging your ski trips to the corporate card. His jaw tightened. You have no idea what I do. I landed the Meridian Hotel Group deal. Meridian only signed because I called their acquisitions director as M. Thorne and personally guaranteed Sterling's performance. It was just to boost the firm's valuation before my final offer, I told him. And I know exactly what you do because I've been running a silent audit on your financials for the past 6 months, including the files you tried to erase. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $300,000 you siphoned into a shell company over the last 2 years, Ethan. I'm talking about the fake invoices from a design firm that just happens to be registered to an address in the Cayman Islands. I know it all. He stepped toward me. You can't prove it. I have the wire transfers, the account numbers, and the server logs showing the payments came from your office computer on weekends when you were the only one there. I held his. I'm not reporting it, Ethan. The scandal would ruin the brand. But you are resigning. You'd stab your own brother in the back. No, I'm holding a criminal accountable who happens to be my brother. It's not the same thing. A thick silence hung in the air before he spun around. This isn't over, he snarled, ripping the door open. Actually, it is, I said to his retreating back. You just don't know it yet. The door had barely closed when another knock came. This time it was my sister Chloe, makeup flawless and despite the tear tracks on her cheeks. "So you're secretly a tech billionaire," she said, strolling in and dropping onto my bed. "Wow, that's impressive." I had to laugh at her total reversal. "Weren't you just whining about your social status 10 minutes ago?" She shrugged, checking her nails. "I'm adaptable. It's key for a lifestyle influencer." Her eyes got that familiar calculating look. "Think of the content." My sister, the Miami real estate queen. My followers would freak out. "Is that why you're here, Chloe? To pitch me?" "It's a strategy," she said, fixing her silk top. "You need a softer image, and I need to be associated with real wealth, not just free lunches." Her pitch was so shameless, so perfectly Olivia. I almost had to respect the hustle. "And what about the actual work? Learning the art business? Doing something other than posting selfies?" She scrunched up her nose like I'd suggested. She scrubbed the floors. "Ugh, no. That stuff is so tedious, and art history literally makes me fall asleep. But I could be the face of it all. The brand ambassador. I'll connect us to that luxury lifestyle market." "Lifestyle ambassador for the Beaumont Gallery," I said, letting the ridiculous title just hang in the air. "You hear how insane that sounds, right?" Olivia bristled. "Go on and laugh. Everybody else does. But my online brand is a real asset, whether you see it or not. I built it myself from nothing, just like you did." For a second there, she actually left me speechless. She had a strange point, even if our definitions of work were from different planets. "I'll think about it," I finally said. "But not right now." She smiled, enjoying her small victory. "By the way, I already put up a vague story about a major family shakeup. The views are going crazy." After she swept out of the room, I sat at my old desk, opening my laptop to look over the gallery's massive debt. Another soft knock broke my concentration. "Come in," I called out, assuming it was Maria with some coffee. But it was my mother, looking more present than she had all evening. She'd swapped her cocktail dress for a simple cashmere set, her New York hostess armor finally set aside. "Your father has locked himself in the library with a bottle of scotch and the gallery's founding documents," she said, perching on the window seat where she used to read to me. "He thinks he can find some dusty old clause to make this all go away." "He won't," I stated. "The debt is real." His own financial advisor confirmed everything. She nodded, her eyes wandering around my childhood bedroom. "You know, I kept it just how you left it. I always figured you'd move back home after your little Miami experiment ran its course." "It wasn't an experiment, Mom. It was my career." "An $80 million company," she whispered, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe it. "My daughter built all that while we thought she was just scraping by." I turned in my chair to look right at her. "You could have come to visit. Any of you could have asked about my work with any real curiosity, but none of you ever did." Tears started to form in her eyes. "I knew, Chloe. Not how much money, not the specifics. But I knew you were brilliant. I saw it when you were just a girl, building entire cities from blocks. Your mind just worked on a different level." She wiped away a tear. "I just never knew how to champion a mind like that in this family, not with a husband like your father." "You could have defended me," I said, feeling that old familiar anger burn in my throat. "All those dinners where he shot down my ideas, called me his silly little girl. You just stood by." "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I told myself I was just keeping the peace in the family, being a supportive wife. But now I realize I let you down as a mother." Her brutal honesty shattered the defenses I'd spent my whole life building. I came here expecting a fight with lawyers and yelling. I never, ever expected an apology. "So what's the plan?" Mom asked quietly. "Tomorrow, all the gallery's debts are consolidated. Apex Properties will officially assume control. The Beaumont name stays on the building, for now. But the entire board of directors is gone." I let that reality sink in. Dad and James are being offered roles as curators emeritus, if they even accept them. It's a symbolic gesture to make the transition look smooth. "And you'll be coming back to New York?" I shook my head. "No, I'm based in Miami. My whole operation is there." She nodded slowly, getting the message I wasn't saying out loud. I was finished with this apartment, this family, and the part they always wanted me to play. "Your father may never ever forgive you for this," she whispered. "I know," I replied. But this was never about getting his forgiveness. It was about finally earning his respect. After she left, I worked all night, perfecting the press release and ignoring the flood of panicked texts from Olivia. As the first pale morning light hit the windows, I put on my sharpest power suit and pulled my hair back into a severe knot. This morning would either be the start of a new Beaumont legacy or the day the old one finally died. I was ready for either outcome. Spiss, when I went downstairs at 7 a.m., the penthouse was unnervingly silent. Our housekeeper poured my coffee without saying a word, her face a perfect mask of respect and fear. The big dining room was immaculate, completely erased of last night's train wreck of a dinner. Not one single piece of evidence of our family's implosion remained, just a thick, choking tension. My phone vibrated. 2 missed calls from my chief financial officer, nervous about the big announcement. A new text from Olivia appeared. So, did you blow up the whole family? Is anybody left? I was replying when my father appeared in the doorway. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. His usual authoritative presence was gone. He hadn't slept. The library. Now, it was not a request. I followed him down the hall to the room that had always been his command center, its dark wood walls covered with his achievements. There were art industry awards and pictures of Dad with celebrity artists and politicians. A monument to his power. And, predictably, not one single photo of me after I'd left for college. He sank into the giant leather chair behind his desk, his usual strategy for dominating a room. I refused to take the chair across from him. Instead, I walked over and sat on the corner of his desk, a move that reversed the power dynamic and clearly unnerved him. My lawyers were up all night, he said, his voice empty. The loan agreements are all airtight. Of course they are, I answered, my voice cool. The Beaumont has been losing money for 5 years. Your taste is behind the times, your curators are lazy, and you haven't signed a single important new artist in a decade. They knew a buyout was their only option. This gallery was valued at $50 million just 3 years ago, he muttered, looking utterly defeated. The gallery was appraised at $50 million, I corrected him, but its debt is $40 million. Another year and the lenders would have taken everything. He gave me a look full of poison. Is that your grand plan, to tear down your grandfather's legacy? I respect what he built. The Beaumont name is staying, but the gallery is being shoved into the 21st century. For the very first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. What does that mean exactly? I had waited my whole life for him to ask for my professional opinion. The irony was almost painful. The Beaumont is about to become the flagship cultural hub for my corporation. We're launching an online art marketplace and focusing on rising digital artists. Most of the junior employees can stay, but your entire senior management team is gone. And me? He asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. You'll be offered the position of Director Emeritus. No actual authority, but you get to keep your office. His jaw tightened. A mascot. A paid consultant, I corrected him gently. With a very generous salary and excellent health insurance. He suddenly got up and went to the massive window that overlooked the park. For a long while, he just stared out at the city with his back to me. How did you do it? He finally asked, his voice cracking. Build an empire from scratch? With 0 contacts and no startup money. I had the education you provided, I reminded him, and an all-consuming need to prove that you were wrong about me. He turned around to look at me, his eyes locked on mine. I was so certain you would fail. I know, I said. You and everybody else. 90% of new businesses collapse, he said finally, choosing his words with care. I thought I was protecting you. By cutting me off from your network and making sure I couldn't get a business loan anywhere in this city? I lifted an eyebrow. That is not protection, Dad. That's control. The word hit him like a slap, maybe. I took what my father started and I made it an institution. I honestly thought that I knew best. But you didn't, I said, my voice like ice. You were wrong about me. You were wrong about the future of art, and you were dead wrong about James being the one to continue the family legacy. The second I said my brother's name, his face turned to stone. James has his issues, but he loves this gallery. James has been trying to sell off assets from under you for the last 6 months, I said plainly, and I have the security tapes to prove it. It's why I had to make my move now, before he secretly bankrupted the entire foundation. My father collapsed back into his chair, the information hitting him like a punch to the gut. That's not possible. Over $2 million, siphoned through fake invoices for art restoration and shipping. The accounting is perfect, but why? He has a huge salary, a family trust. Gambling debts, I said. High-stakes poker games in Macau. My audit team found all of it. He buried his face in his hands, and when he finally looked up, he suddenly looked every one of his 70 years. So my son is a thief, my entire life's work is in ruins, and I was too proud to see any of it. The raw, painful honesty in his voice was shocking. I came in here ready for more yelling, more denials, not this hollow, broken admission. Not completely blind, I said, softening my tone just slightly. You were just looking in the wrong direction. A thick silence settled over the office, filled with years of unspoken resentments and failure. When he finally spoke again, all the arrogance was gone, replaced by a spark of genuine curiosity. How did you do all of this? He asked. With no help, no access to our money. How did you build something strong enough to come for us? For the first time, it felt like a real question. I started with nothing, I told him, explaining the small consulting jobs for tiny hotels to scrape together cash. Then I built an AI platform that completely personalizes a guest's stay from the second they book. It was based on that pitch you shot down when I was 23. His eyes flickered, he remembered. The loyalty program, he murmured. I just nodded. Yep. I made it better, smarter. Used it to land my first real clients. Every penny went back in. I lived on ramen for 4 years and found people who actually believed in the vision. He spoke softly, almost to himself. And you did it all without the sterling name opening any doors. Actually, being underestimated helped, I admitted. It's like a superpower. No one ever sees you coming. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Clearly, the silence that followed wasn't hostile anymore. I glanced at my watch. The acquisition goes public in an hour. We need a plan. His voice was low. What about Ethan and Olivia? I laid it out for him. Ethan can resign with a quiet severance package, or he can deal with felony fraud charges. As for Olivia, I let that hang for a moment. She pitched me a wild idea last night, to be our new head of brand experience. Her social media reach is a goldmine, Ice explained, if we play it smart. My father just looked stunned. You'd keep them on after everything they pulled? This wasn't about revenge, Dad. It was about claiming my place here, but on my own terms. He nodded slowly, his eyes shifting from the unsigned papers on his desk back to me. His expression was different now. You outplayed me. Completely, he said. And the pride in his voice hit me like a wave. Your grandfather would have loved this. That was the highest praise he'd ever given me. It wasn't victory I felt, or forgiveness. It was something else entirely. I learned from the best, I said, even when you weren't teaching. He extended his hand across that huge mahogany desk. Well then, Madam Chairwoman. I shook it, our first real deal as equals. Welcome to Apex Innovations, Dad. Fast forward 6 months. I was standing in our new flagship hotel in Chicago. The old Sterling Grand was gone, replaced by sleek lounges and state-of-the-art tech. It had a new energy that respected the past but was racing into the future. My life as CEO was now a constant juggle between our two headquarters, overseeing the merger and our next big move. Merging the companies had its bumps, but it went better than I could have hoped. Dad surprised us all, diving into his new advisory role. Once the sting of being bought out wore off, he loved coaching the young managers and catching up with our legacy guests. We even started a weekly masterclass for him, and I have to admit, I started enjoying them. For the first time, we had a relationship built on mutual respect. Ethan's reaction, on the other hand, was exactly as dramatic as you'd expect. When I showed him the proof of his fraud, his first instinct was to threaten to sue me. He figured out pretty fast he had no way out. He took the deal. Pay back the money, step down, and get a business degree if he ever wanted back in. To my shock, he actually enrolled in an MBA program. He's halfway done and now calls me with surprisingly smart questions about our strategy. And Olivia has been a complete rock star as our brand ambassador. She's running a whole new division for custom travel packages, and her social media genius is invaluable. Her followers ate up the whole family redemption story she spun so perfectly, hiding all the ugly parts. Her campaigns brought in the exact younger, richer crowd we'd been trying to attract for years. But my mother's transformation was the biggest of all. No longer forced to play family referee, she stopped drinking so much, launched a foundation for kids in need, and joined a board that mentors women in business. I want to help girls like you, she told me, so their mothers don't fail them like I failed you. Now, when I walk through our hotels, the staff smiles with real respect. I'm not some shadow investor, or just Arthur Sterling's forgotten daughter anymore. I'm Maya Sterling, the CEO who saved an empire and built its future. My assistant's voice buzzed through the intercom, pulling me back. Your father's waiting in the boardroom with the quarterly numbers, she said, and your mother confirmed dinner with the new Asian partners. I thanked her and headed to the meeting, but I stopped at the digital history wall in the lobby. It showed our whole story, from my grandfather's first little inn to the new Sterling Apex Group. And there I was. My picture was finally up there, next to my father and grandfather, 3 generations. Thanksgiving was just a week away, and I knew it would be different. We were aiming for a quiet family dinner this year, something real, without all the fake performances of holidays past. No big speeches, no business talk, just us. We were all figuring out how to be a family again. The road from outcast to CEO was so much harder than I'd imagined when I left Chicago 10 years ago. Balancing this company and my own little family takes a kind of patience I'm still learning. And honestly, sometimes the old wounds feel raw, like it could fall apart, especially when old habits surface in meetings. See, taking over the company was the easy part. Rebuilding the relationships was the real fight, trying to survive our messy history and this new dynamic. Dad still falls back into his old command and control voice sometimes before he catches himself. And I still flinch waiting for a criticism that never comes. But slowly, we're finding a path. Mom had a brunch last month where everyone actually talked and listened, and nobody stormed out. Small victories, but they felt huge. The biggest moment, though, was late one night when Dad and I were looking at the quarterly numbers. They were incredible: 95% guest retention, and revenue up 40%. He just stared at the screen for a long time. Then he said, "You did more for this company in 6 months than I did in my first 10 years. That single sentence fixed something in me I didn't even know was still broken. It wasn't about getting his professional approval anymore. It was the personal validation I'd craved my entire life. This whole experience taught me that a successful business can't fix a broken family. Proving them all wrong was exciting, sure, but it was an empty victory until it led to a real connection. I learned that winning the battle isn't the same as healing the wound. Walking into the boardroom to meet my father, I thought about the long journey from that bitter feud to this very moment. I learned that success isn't the best revenge. Not really. Success without connection is just lonely. The real victory wasn't proving my dad wrong. It was building a future where we could both be right, together. If you've ever dealt with the unique pain of a family business, or felt invisible to your own family, I hope my story offers some hope and a dose of reality. Building a legacy is one thing, but healing a family takes more than a healthy profit margin. It takes raw honesty, letting your guard down, and finding the courage to give a second chance, even if you're not sure they deserve it. Have you gone through a similar crisis in your own family business? Tell me about it in the comments below. How did you navigate that line between family and work? If this story hit, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching my journey from outcast to CEO. And just remember, true success isn't what you can build by yourself, it's what you can finally build together.